Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here to talk about rereading. Specifically, I'm going to talk about some books that didn't become favorites until after I reread them. I've talked about before how I'm a big fan of rereading. That's something I enjoy doing, and as always, I'm trying to do more of it. I feel like a lot of us, once we start reviewing more books, we kind of feel like we should spend more time on new books. And obviously, in terms of what I read a lot more new books than rereads. But I would like to get my reread numbers up. That's something I kind of want to work on, and it's something that I enjoy. It's something that I think is really important. My name is Martinez, did a video a while back on why she rereads, why she thinks it's so important. I will link that down below. But I think there's a lot of things that rereading gives us. It's not only enjoyable, you know, it's fun to return to a story that you love, but you also notice new things in it, which I think is exciting, and it can also give you a different perspective on the book, whether because you're in a different place in your life, you've had different experiences, you know more about your reading taste, you've read other things, or just because like the sheer act of reading something again can change the way you view it. You can notice different things, especially like if because you're rereading it, you're less worried about what's going to happen and paying more attention to how it's going to happen. And I think it's also just a great way to sort of like hone your reading tastes or your reviewing abilities. Like not that it's necessary to be a thoughtful reader or reviewer or anything, but I do think that rereading provides some special benefits in addition to being something I really enjoy. So I'm going to share some books that maybe I did enjoy the first time, but it wasn't until rereading them that they became a favorite. Or maybe I didn't have a great time with this book and it wasn't until later that I was able to really love and appreciate it. And also, I have a lot of favorite books that I have not reread. Like rereading is not the sole marker for me of a favorite book, like an all-time favorite book or anything like that. But I do think it's interesting that sometimes I will know immediately a book is a favorite, and sometimes it'll take me a little while, like a few reads and maybe some passage of time. So enough introduction. The first one I want to talk about is actually kind of cheating already, but that is the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the Fellowship of the Ring. The reason I say this is kind of cheating is because I only officially finished this series a couple years ago. I've told the story before, but in case you haven't heard this, I first started reading the series when I was in like 5th grade, I think, and probably was much too advanced for me. I remember enjoying it enough, but I was getting to the 3rd book, and the sequence of events in the 3rd book and the 3rd movie is a little different. So like near the beginning of the 3rd book, you're still in a scene with a giant spider that I really hated from the 2nd book, and we start the 3rd book and that's kind of where we're still at, and I was not having a good time with that, and I was like, I'll just read this later, I'll read something else right now. And then like 10 plus years later I finally get around to restarting and finishing the whole series because I was part of a buddy read with Vendi from Caught Between Pages, Katie from A Sea of Tomes, and Kelsey, who I'm not sure makes videos anymore or content, but I really enjoyed rereading / reading this with them. And like, I think it really was necessary to reread this for me to really fully appreciate it, because like I said, I vaguely remembered enjoying the books. I've grown up loving the movies, and so I know the story and I loved the story, but it really made such a difference to come back to this as an adult, and especially in the year 2020. I did a whole video on why I felt it was such a perfect series to read in that year, so I'll link that if you're interested. But I just fell in love with these characters and with this story and with the themes, like these ideas about bravery and goodness and sacrifice. And I think this series is a phenomenal example of how you can have a story with impact and with stakes and with consequences and with emotional investment that doesn't do these very specific things that I sometimes feel like fantasy authors feel like they have to do in order to make a story meaningful. And that's something I really am impressed with. I expected to enjoy this series. I expected even to really like it, maybe even to love it, but I did not expect the series to just like find a place in my heart and soul, like forever. So I am so grateful that I reread these. And I know I don't need to like hype up Lord of the Rings, but this is really one of the like quintessential examples for me of a series that I did not love until I reread it. And another one I have here is the Wrinkle in Time series by Madeleine L'Engle. This is the fancy like Library of Congress edition that is a bind up of supposedly the whole series, depending on how you look at it. A Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door, A Swiftly Tilting Planet, and Many Waters. So it's this like beautiful edition. The paper is like so silky. There's like a ribbon bookmark. There's these really cool end papers. It's like a cloth bound fanciness going on here. So this is quite a fancy edition. And this one is also kind of a weird story. I guess a lot of these actually are going to be kind of weird stories. Maybe that's a correlation. But so I first read these books, specifically the first book, when I was very young. I think it was a read aloud in our class, actually. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it enough to eventually, especially as I started running out of other things to read, to reread that one and to kind of continue on in the series, and ended up becoming like a comfort reread series for me. But then when I got a little older and I started kind of figuring out my reading tastes more, it took it into my head that I hated all sci-fi, which, to be fair, I did hate a lot of sci-fi that I picked up. I wasn't getting on very well with the science fiction books that I had read, that I was trying. And I kind of like took that to mean like retroactively that I hadn't enjoyed these books. So I kind of just like gave up on them. I stopped really paying attention to them. But then just a few years ago when the new movie came out, a lot of people were picking up the first book, especially for the first time, like specifically a lot of adult readers. And the things they were saying about it just really irritated me and got under my skin, because it was very, like, in my opinion, it wasn't a terribly helpful review. Like, the criticisms were things like, oh, I'm sure if you are a kid, this is fine, or like it's too whimsical, or like things that, like, not that you can't say that you didn't like a book because it was whimsical and that's not your thing, but specifically the kinds of reviews that I was seeing over and over again, they kind of seem to boil down to this book is not good enough because it was written for children. And I had read like middle grade books here and there, but I hadn't really had like strong feelings about it, which is funny to think about now. But being the stubborn person that I am, I was like, you know, I remember enjoying those books. What if I try it again? And that kind of inspired me to fall back in love with this series. I now want to read basically everything Madeleine L'Engle wrote. Like, I've read her poetry, which I loved. I really want to read her nonfiction. I want to read some of her other fiction books. I'm technically in the middle of a reread of this series, which is taking me years. But like, it really sparked my love for her books again. And I also really think she was a fascinating person. I really like reading about her personally. So there's a couple biographies of her I want to get to. And also this was one of the books that I think really sparked my passionate interest in and I guess defense for middle grade, and specifically the importance and necessity of older readers reading books that are written for kids. So anyway, there's a lot of like meaning attached to me getting back into this series, but this is kind of one where like it was a favorite and then it was not a favorite and then it was a favorite again, I guess. Yeah. Next I have Beastkeeper by Kat Hellison. This is a very short, very strange Beauty and the Beast retelling that I really struggle to recommend to people because it is so bizarre. Like, it's like a very particular kind of flavor, and it's not something that I find it easy to predict if it's gonna work for people. Obviously, it was hit or miss if it was gonna work for me even, because the first time I read this, I gave it 3 stars, basically because I didn't know what to do with it. I thought it was interesting. There were some parts that I liked about it, but I didn't really enjoy the experience. It wasn't what I thought I was getting. It wasn't what I really wanted from this book, so I kind of just like gave it 3 stars because that seemed like how to sum up my feelings on it. But then I was doing the booktube reread project, and I forget, I think one of the challenges was to reread a book that you didn't enjoy, or like that you were thinking about unhauling or something, because multiple times I almost unhauled this book, but I didn't, obviously, and I reread it and I completely fell in love with it. Like, I gave it 5 stars. I think that knowing what the story was and what direction it was going to go and the specific kind of weirdness and darkness that this book was going to have really helped me enjoy it, because being taken by surprise, I didn't have a great time, but knowing what to expect, I did. And like, I feel like this is probably one of my favorite Beauty and the Beast retellings, maybe? I don't know, it's such a strange book. I fully understand why it doesn't work for a lot of people. Obviously it didn't work for me very well the first time, but being prepared for it, I did really enjoy it, and I'm so glad that I didn't unhaul this and that I did reread it, because obviously I really liked it. Next I have one that I did absolutely love the first time I read it. It even made my favorite books of the year list, but it wasn't until rereading it that it really solidified for me that this is an all-time favorite book, and that is Sherwood by Megan Spooner. I have a whole spoiler-free review on this, which I feel like I keep talking about this book, so I'm sure you've seen it if you're interested, but just in case, I will link that. Yeah, so as I said, I did love this the first time I read it. I don't remember what the ranking was in my favorites of the year, but it was like fairly close to the top, I think. But then it wasn't until rereading this last year that it really sunk in for me that this is an all-time favorite book. I just love it, and it also solidified Megan Spooner as a favorite author for me. I love the way she writes characters, her writing style, the way she tells stories, the kinds of stories that she tells, and that's something that I'm finding with like authors that I consider favorite authors versus authors who write favorite books of mine, is that there's this connection of like, I feel like we find the same kinds of things interesting, you know? Like her ideas are things that appeal to me even before I pick up the book and read the book, you know? And I just thought this was wonderful. I know there's a lot of negative reviews for it, and this is another, I think, very polarizing book, but I love it so deeply. I love the character work. I love the relationship development. I love the feminism in this book and the way that it is so explicitly against the not like other girls idea, even though Marion as a main character is a very like tomboy kind of character. It never looks down at women who aren't, which is sadly still a pretty rare thing, I feel like. I love the way this works as a retelling, although that's another thing that I think is very hit or miss for people. I've said before, I think Robin Hood is kind of in a sweet spot for me for retellings where there are elements of the original story that I like and that make me intrigued by retellings of it, but it's not something that is so important to me or that I have such strong feelings about that I have very strong opinions about what should and shouldn't be changed, because this book changes a lot. But yeah, I love this book, and I anticipate rereading it many times because I really do think it is one of my favorites of all time. Okay, and then the last book I'm going to talk about today, although I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of other books I could talk about in this video, so I'm sure I will be doing a part 2 at some point. But I have The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Vecker. This is now the first book in a series. Very exciting. We finally have that second book. No, I haven't read it yet, even though I've been waiting for it for years at this point, because I'm like that. So this is a historical fantasy book that I think would be really good for historical fiction readers who are maybe unsure about fantasy, but they want to maybe dip their toes in, because there is a fantasy element, but a big part of the feeling and the story of this book is very historical. It's set in turn of the century New York City, and it really talks a lot about the immigrant experience in addition to, it's like different ways of being an outsider, because our two main characters are Hava and Ahmad. Ahmad is a Jinni, and Hava is a golem, and we get a lot about their backstory. This is very much like a slow kind of character-focused book, so I think if you don't love the characters, you probably won't get on with this one, but I really did love them, especially Hava. I adore her so much. Like, she's like one of my kind of main characters, you know, because she's very quiet. She's just like doing her best, and she is just like, the way that she has to learn throughout this book that she also is a person and she also deserves to be happy is just so beautiful. I love her and Ahmad's dynamic, like their relationship when they do eventually cross paths, because that doesn't happen right away. I love Helene Vecker's writing. I love the like historical setting and the way that was written. There are specific scenes in this book that just like stay in my memory because they are just so like beautifully evoked. Like, there's one in a dance hall that I think about all the time, like all the time. I love it so much. Yeah, I'm getting very incoherent about this book, but this is one where I read the first time and I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars. I was a little disappointed in parts of the ending because it felt kind of abrupt to me in the way the fantasy elements were eventually combined more with the historical elements, so I had some critiques of it. But I really liked it. I even lent it to a friend because I really liked it. I thought she might like it and I wanted to talk about it with somebody. And she did read it and she enjoyed it. And she said something about how, like, she really liked it, but it's not something she would think about rereading necessarily. And I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That's how I feel about it, is I liked it, but I wouldn't necessarily go back to it. Which is funny, obviously, given the context of this video. So then, like, several years later, I was studying abroad and I was, like, looking at the local library to see, like, what books were available, and they had this one, and obviously I hadn't brought all my books with me, so I didn't have my copy with me. And I was like, you know what? I kind of feel in the mood to reread it. It just feels like something I'm in the mood to read again. So I checked it out, and I reread it, and I, like, completely fell in love with it. This is another one where I think knowing the direction things go made the places I had criticisms for bother me less, because I loved it. And I'm pretty sure I even, like, within that week, I think I might have read this twice, actually, or at least reread large chunks of it. So yeah, I really, really love this one. I need to finally read the sequel, but I am very glad that I reread it, as with all of these. So yeah, those are some books that are favorites of mine, but they weren't favorites until I reread them. I'd love to know if you guys have any examples of this, like if you are a rereader, if this is something that sometimes happens to you. And like I said, I don't always need a reread to determine if something is a favorite for me, but it's really nice to be pleasantly surprised by this. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!